Hello everyone, and today we're going to be working on our factory brake system for our Mustang and upgrading it to this beautiful, awesome setup you see right here. And this new upgrade is going to include new brake lines, new brake pads, new dust shields, new rotors for the front and rear, and these are slotted and drilled, new calipers for the front, and wheel spacers. The tools we'll be using for today are car panel removal set, a 21mm socket with a breaker bar. We have a pin punch, our hammer. We have our torque wrenches, and we have two of them just for tight spaces. We have a 13mm, 11mm, 10mm wrench, 15mm socket and socket wrench, 13mm socket, 10mm socket. We have a ruler, a few zip ties, needle nose pliers, a long screwdriver, thread locking compound, and then we have our brake grease, anti-seize, some .3 brake fluid, brake parts cleaner, and we have our bleeder bottle as well, and you're going to need jack and jack stands. So for our first step, let's go ahead and loosen up the lug nuts. So it's a 21mm socket and a breaker bar, and we're going to do the same order as when we did the brake flush job. So we're going to start on the rear passenger side. Once the lug nuts are loose, let's go ahead and lift up the vehicle and place our jack stands under it. With the jack and jack stands lift in the vehicle, let's go ahead and remove the rest of these lug nuts, and these should be somewhat finger tight. So that's 3, 4, and let's see if we can get number 5 off. There we go. And we'll just go ahead and remove the wheel. Now before we continue on with this project, let's go ahead and test fit the wheel spacer and measure the stud length, and I'll show you why. So let me get one of these lug nuts on here, and it's finger tight. Now we're going to measure how far the stud sticks out from the wheel spacer, and it's about 10mm. Now if you look inside the wheel, we have 5 cavities, and that's where that stud's going to stick into. So let's measure the depth of these cavities, and there we go. Let's go ahead and zoom in on our scale, and it looks like we have a cavity depth of approximately 18mm. So if you have a stud sticking out at 10mm, you have plenty of room with an 18mm cavity depth. So that's perfect. And now that we know the factory wheels will work, let's grab our 13mm socket and remove both of these guide pin bolts for the caliper. So let's see if I can break this top one loose. And there we go. That one was on there pretty good. And let's loosen up the bottom one. Come on. There we go. And these should come right out. And let's go ahead and lift our caliper up. There we go. And we want to hang this up, so let me see if I can move the camera real quick. So go ahead and suspend the caliper, grab some zip ties, and we got a nice little metal piece right here we can use. So it's going to feed our zip tie through, and feed it through the hole in the caliper. And sorry that my hands are in the way. And we'll just zip tie it up there. Beautiful. And let me move my camera back down. There we go. And let's go remove the brake pads so they come right out. There's 1, and there's 2. Alright, let's go and remove our anchor plate bolts. So there's 1, and there's 2. So go ahead and grab your 15mm socket and socket wrench. And this one might be on a little bit tighter, so it's going to require a little bit more, there we go, oomph. And loosen that one up. And then we'll move on to the other one. See if I can get my hands in there. Come on. And this one, come on. Come on. And there we go. And we'll just take these right off. And with the bolts out, we'll just go ahead and lift this anchor plate up, and this lifts right off. Nothing difficult here. Set it aside. And we'll go ahead and remove the rotor as well. And again, this usually comes off very easily. Very nice. And now we're ready to clean the area. So let's grab some brake cleaner, and let's go ahead and spray down this whole area and make sure we remove all this brake dust or any residue left behind. And we'll go ahead and spray it down nice and good. And take a shop towel, and we'll just clean this all up until it looks halfway decent. Alright, now we get to go the opposite direction and start seeing results. So let's grab our rotor. Now this one is the rear passenger one. These slotted ones do have a designated direction, so make sure you pay attention to that when you grab the right rotor. So let's go ahead and place it through the studs. And that's not all the way on there. Let's see, push it a little bit more. There we go. And let's grab a lug nut. And we're going to go ahead and tighten this lug nut on there. It keeps the rotor from wobbling while you're installing the rest of the parts. Then we'll go ahead and grab our brake cleaner. And let's go ahead and spray down the rotor again. We just want to make sure there's no grease or residue left behind from the gloves. So we're going to go ahead and spray the whole thing down, take our shop towel, and go ahead and wipe everything off. And with the brake caliper anchor plate we set aside earlier, grab your brake cleaner. And let's go ahead and spray this bad boy down. Can never be too generous. We want to get this as clean as possible, so we'll go ahead and wipe it down with our shop towels. And now we're ready to remove and clean our guide pins. There's one here and one here. And all you have to do is pull on it, be very gentle. There we go. That came out fairly easy, no damage. So let's go ahead and clean out the plate itself first, so make sure we get any old grease out of there. And we'll do the pin as well. We're just going to wipe it down, get it clean as possible. Grab our brake grease, and we're going to do a nice fine coating around this pin. And we gave this one a nice generous amount. I like it. Now let's go ahead and install it right back in the plate, and this pushes right in. And there we go. And it looks like the plunger looks pretty good. And let's repeat the same steps for the other side as well. And now we're ready to install our anchor plate. So grab our 2 bolts from earlier, grab our thread locking compound, and we'll put a nice little generous coat on this first bolt. And grab the plate, and it should go on the same way it came off. We'll go ahead and finger tight this bolt. We're not going to tighten it down quite yet. And there we go. Now we can start the second bolt. Go ahead and put a nice generous amount of thread locking compound on that one as well. And we'll start finger tightening that one as well. And we'll grab our 50mm socket and tighten this up. And we'll go ahead and get these bolts snug so we can bring in the torque wrench and go ahead and torque it down to 76 foot-pounds. That's 1. And that's 2. Alright, here comes the fun part. We got to rotate the brake caliper piston clockwise. So if you look at it, there's a divot right there, and they're horizontal from each other. Now there is a tool for this that is actually made to rotate this, but you could do this with needle nose pliers. So with needle nose pliers, just go ahead and turn it. There we go. And as you turn it clockwise, like we're doing right now, it'll bring the piston in. That's what we want for new brake pads. And come on, there we go. And that looked like it went a little bit deeper, so that looks pretty good. Next, let's go ahead and install our new spring clips. So let's go ahead and start with the bottom one first, and these push right in. So let's see. Come on. And there's 1. And now we're ready for the top one. And 2. That looks very nice. And once those are in, I'm going to grab my brake pads. And you see the little metal tab right there? We're going to put that on the inside. So let's go ahead and grab our brake grease. And we're going to take a little bit and just go dabbing it on the back of the brake pad. And we're going to spread this around the metal area only. You do not want to get any grease on the front of the pad. The pretty much rule of thumb here is anytime metal touches metal, you want a thin median in between it. And nice little thin coats on the edges as well. It looks pretty good. Now I'm going to do this without touching the front of the pad. I'm going to go install this one pad where it's supposed to go. There we go. And repeat the same steps with the outer pad. And without touching any grease against the rotor. That looks good. Now go ahead and grab a pair of snips or cutters. And let's go ahead and remove this zip tie. There we go. And now we can install our caliper with our guide pin bolts. Now if the caliper does not fit over the brake pads, no big deal. Just turn the piston in more like we did on the earlier step. And with our 13mm socket and socket wrench, let's go ahead and install these guide pin bolts. And of course we'll start with finger tightening them. So let's see if we can get the top one in. There's 1 and there's 2. And let's go ahead and snug these up. And now we're ready to torque them down using our torque wrench with 24 foot-pounds. See if I can get that on there. There's 1. And there's 2. Alright, now we can start focusing on the brake lines. So we want to detach our speed sensor from our bracket that goes to our brake line. So take your trim removal tool, and we're going to pry against that one clip. And it came out very easily, and we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now that the speed sensor is no longer clipped to the brake line, we can go ahead and take our 13mm wrench and loosen up the hard line. And the whole idea is just hold onto the bracket and take this brake line all the way out. And I put a bottle under there just to see if I can catch any of it. And it was a very minor amount anyway, so we're in pretty good shape. And once it's disconnected, go ahead and grab one of your shop towels and just go ahead and clean it off. That will keep any dripping from brake fluid anywhere else. Alright, let's go ahead and grab our 10mm socket and socket wrench. And let's go and remove the brake line bracket. And this comes off fairly easily. And there we go. And that comes right out. Very nice. And now we can disconnect the other end of the brake line with this flow bolt right here. So with a 13mm socket, let's go ahead and loosen this up. There we go. And be aware, fluid's going to come out of this. There we go. And you don't see it on camera, but the bleeder bottle is below it catching all this. And with the old brake line on the ground, we can compare the two. There is a left side and a right side. So while it's on the ground, go ahead and install your new speed sensor clips. And let's move back to the vehicle, grab your thread locking compound and the bolt, and we're going to put a nice thin coat so we can reinstall our brake line bracket. So it goes in the same way it comes out. Let's see if I can get it in there. Very nice. And we'll go and start finger tightening it. Tighten it down with our 10mm socket. And we're just going to get it snug. There we go. And then we'll torque it down with 15 foot-pounds. And there we go. And with the support of the bracket installed, we can reconnect our hard line. So start finger tightening it, don't cross thread it, and tighten it down with your 13mm wrench. Very nice. And we're almost done. Now we can reattach the speed sensor to the brake line. And that snaps right in. And now the clips on the brake line itself though, you gotta give it nice little finesse. Looks very nice. And then we'll wipe everything down just to make sure there's no excess brake fluid anywhere. And now we're ready to install our new flow bolt. So we have the bolt and 2 copper washers. Put one on first, then feed the flow bolt through the brake line, and then put the other washer on there. The trick is you want the washers to sandwich your brake line. And then we'll go ahead and line up the flow bolt with the caliper. And see if I can do it at this angle. Come on. And we're going to start feeding it by hand. Get it nice finger tight. Grab our 13mm socket and socket wrench, and we'll tighten this down till it's snug. And then, of course, we'll grab our torque wrench and torque it down to 24 foot-pounds. Come on. There we go. Very nice. All right, now this step is very important. We need to go ahead and verify that our brake fluid is topped off. You do not want your reservoir ever going empty because it could create air bubbles in your system. So grab your brake fluid, and we'll go ahead and add a little extra in there because we're going to end up bleeding all your brakes. And let's return back to the caliper, and let's remove the bleeder valve cap. And I'm using a 11mm wrench to help me pry it up. There we go. Now let's go ahead and install our bleeder bottle. And I have a little bit of fluid already in the bleeder bottle, which is what you need. And we'll go ahead and press it right on our bleeder valve, nice and tight. Then grab your 11mm wrench and go and loosen up your bleeder valve. And you want to turn this about 2/4 turns or 180 degrees. There we go. And just like the brake flush video, I'll start pumping the brake pedal. And start getting these air bubbles out. Come on. Yeah, had a lot of air in there. Keep going. There we go. And you're going to keep doing this just for a little bit until you get all the air out of the system. Once we have, let's go ahead and tighten up our bleeder valve. Very nice. Nice and snug. Now let's pinch the hose at the bottom of our bleeder bottle so we don't make too much of a mess. And then I'll grab a shop towel and clean up any excess brake fluid. And then go ahead and grab your cap and we'll reinstall it. So let's go ahead and remove that one lug nut we used to secure the rotor. And then grab your anti-seize. And we're going to apply a nice thin coat on the rotor to the area that the wheel spacer mates with the rotor itself. Do not put any anti-seize on anywhere other than this one area. And then I'm going to spread it around just so I can apply a nice thin even coat. And now we can install our wheel spacer. So grab some thread locking compound. We're going to put a little bit on each stud. The whole idea is you don't really want this wheel spacer coming loose. And just like everything else we do, we're going to start by finger tightening all the lug nuts. And let's see, there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up a little bit more just using the socket. But I'm not going to put a lot of torque on it yet. And we're going to do a star pattern, of course, because we always want it even. And now that the lug nuts are put on evenly, we're going to take a screwdriver and stick it in between the plates of the rotor. This will act as a brace while we torque down all 5 of these lug nuts. We're going to do 100 foot-pounds. So let's see. Here, come on. A bit more. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. 4. And 5. And just to make sure we got all the grease off everything, grab your brake cleaner and let's clean the rotor one more time, because the last thing you want to do is hear your brake squeak. And this wheel's almost done, so let's go ahead and install the wheel and lug nuts. And see if I can lift it. There we go. We'll start finger tightening the lug nuts. There's 2, 3, 4, 5. And once in there pretty good, let's go ahead and raise the vehicle up, remove our jack stand. There we go. And then lower the vehicle down. And then let's go ahead and torque down all 5 of these lug nuts. And this is going to be 95 foot-pounds. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all you have to do is repeat the exact same steps on your rear driver's side as well. And now we're going to continue with the front of the vehicle. This is going to be the front passenger side. So we'll lift up the vehicle, put your jack and jack stand, and remove the wheel and lug nuts. Similar steps that we did with the rear wheels. And now we have access to detach your speed sensor clips, and these just pull right off. So there's one, and let's see if I can get this other one off. Come on. Little pull. There we go. Very nice. And similar to the rear brake line, let's go ahead and take your 13mm wrench and go ahead and disconnect our hard brake line. And again, hold on to the bracket while you loosen this. And once it's loose enough, we can take it off with our fingers. Now you will get a little bit of brake fluid leak. No big deal, just wipe it down with your shop towel. Alright, now let's go ahead and grab our 10mm socket and socket wrench, and we're going to remove the brake line bracket. Now there's two of them, so we'll go ahead and take off this one since we already seen this before. And the second one is behind this strut. So I'll move the camera over, and it's right directly behind it. And my hands are a little bit in the way, but it's pretty much perpendicular to the strut. And I'll loosen that up, and there we go, and it comes right out. So let's go ahead and remove our brake caliper bolts. So there's one, let's see if I can move the camera. There's one right here at the top, and there's one at the bottom right there. And all you need is a 15mm socket. Now this is going to be on pretty tight, so be prepared to get a little oomph. And there we go, and get a nice little pull. Very nice. And then just go ahead and take both of these out. And by then everything should be disconnected, so pull on the caliper. Very nice. And then we'll take out the rotor as well. Awesome. And of course, since we ordered a new dust shield, we have 3 bolts we need to take out. So there's 2, and one at the bottom. Right there is 3. And all you need is your 10mm socket, and these come right off. So there's 1, and I move the camera so you can see the second one. As I drop it, 2, and come on, number 3. There we go. And that came right out, 3. All right, now this is where the fun begins. We get to start putting everything back together. So grab your thread lock compound, and then grab your new dust shield. And let's go ahead and install this new one. This goes on the same way as the old one came off. So line up the holes with the new bolts with thread lock compound, and we'll finger tighten every one of these before we tighten them down. So there's 2, and we'll get the third one at the bottom in there. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and torque it down using 15 foot-pounds. And I got a smaller torque wrench for this one just because I can. And that's 2, and 3. And just like the rear wheel, we're going to go ahead and clean and install our new rotor, and this one slides on just as easy. Very nice. And now we can compare our old brake caliper with our new one. And let's look at the brake line. So this one turns at the bottom and then goes up. So grab the same brake line that matches this one. We have it because there is a left and a right side. And let's go remove our flow bolt. That comes with our 2 nice washers. And we're going to put one at the top and one at the bottom. We're going to sandwich our brake line, just like so. Make sure you put those on that exact way. And then match it up with your old caliper. So the brake line should route the exact same way. And we'll get that nice and finger tight. Very nice. So let's zoom out just to verify we have the right brake line. Take a look at it. We have our center bracket, looks good. Yep, that's a good match. Very nice. And then we have our 2 clips. So let's go ahead and install our 2 speed sensor clips. And it's very similar to the old brake line. It's nothing difficult. And that one snapped in. That's 1. And let's get one more. And that's 2. So far this is a perfect match of the old one. Alright, this is probably my favorite step. Let's go ahead and apply a little bit of thread locking compound to the caliper bolts. And let's install our new brake caliper. This is where you're going to see the big difference. And I routed the brake line where it's supposed to be. Oh man, look at that. And then go ahead and install these bolts. We'll start finger tightening them, of course. Come on. I'm kind of eyeballing this a little bit. And then go ahead and tighten them up using your 15mm socket. And then tighten them down. Oh man, those look pretty good. And of course, grab your anti-seize, and we're going to apply a nice thin coat to where the wheel spacer meets with the rotor. So I'm going to do the same things we did on the rear wheel. And now of course I'll just go ahead and spread it around, get a nice thin, even coating. Alright, so we're going to jump the gun just a little bit and install our wheel spacer. So grab your thread locking compound, and we're going to apply a little bit to your studs. The whole idea is we're going to use the wheel spacer to secure the rotor while we install the brake pads later on. So go ahead and put in all your lug nuts, and we'll start by hand, of course. So there's 3, 4, come on, and 5. And I'll just tighten these down using a regular socket and socket wrench. And I went ahead and did a star pattern just like we always do. Next, let's go ahead and install our new brake line. So go ahead and install our brackets first, and we'll go ahead and mate everything up. Come on, there we go. Grab your threadline compound, of course, and we'll start with the top bracket just because it's easiest to get to. And start with finger tightening it, and we'll go ahead and snug it down, use our 10mm socket and socket wrench. Very nice. And we'll do the same thing for the one that's behind the strut as well. Of course, thread locking compound, and we'll go ahead and snug this one up as well. And with the brackets installed, let's go ahead and connect the hard line, and we'll start by finger tightening this, and we'll make sure we do not cross thread it. And then grab our 13mm wrench and make sure it's nice and tight. So give it a few more turns. There we go, looks good. And with all the bolts secure, let's go ahead and attach the speed sensor to the brake line. So let's see if these clips will fight me. So I got one. Let's get this bottom one. I gotta press really hard, watch. Come on. There we go, that's 2. Man, these things can fight you. That looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and torque everything down. So we'll start with this top bracket. That's going to be 15 foot-pounds. And come on, one more turn. There we go, there's 1. And we'll do the one behind the strut as well. 2. And of course our last one is our flow bolt. This one we hand tightened earlier, 24 foot-pounds. So do not forget this one. This one's very important. You're going to leak brake fluid if you don't tighten this one properly. And there we go. And we're almost done. So same as earlier, that metal tab goes on the inside. And I'm going to take a little bit of brake grease and do the same steps we did with the rear brake pads. So let me go ahead and grab a little bit out. And hopefully I don't glob it everywhere. There we go. Get a nice thin coat on the back where the metal is. And I'm going to thin this right out. And make sure it's nice and even. Very nice. And do not touch the front of the brake pad with grease. And we'll slide it right into the caliper. Come on. And there we go. And then we want to go ahead and back it out so it lines up with the holes. Beautiful. And of course we'll repeat the same steps for the outer brake pad. Nice little glob of grease. Spread it out. And again, make sure you do not get any on the front of the pad. If not, you're going to be pretty much hearing squeaks for days. And we'll insert this one and line up with the holes. That's very nice. And with the pad set in the right position, let's go ahead and install our brake pad pin. We'll start with the top one. So this one, just go ahead and push it right through the holes. We're going to line it up in between the pad holes and the caliper. Very nice. And this is where you want to take a punch pen and a hammer. And our goal is here to go ahead and push in the brake pad pin without scratching any of the paint on your caliper. So I'm going to start very gently, and then I'm going to move the hammer strokes to be a lot harder just so we can get that pin flush. And now that we have the top pin secure, we can go ahead and install our spring. So go under the pin, press it down, and install your second pin. So this is where you got to kind of press on the spring while you're pushing the pin towards you. Very nice. And the same steps, we're going to go ahead and use the punch and get that pin flush with the caliper. And let's see if I can show you. There we go. Pause it, and you can see the pin is flush with the caliper without chipping the paint. All right, now we can start bleeding the brakes. So we're going to start with the inner bleeder valve, then outer, and then go back to the inner bleeder valve. So go ahead and grab a 10mm wrench and your bleeder bottle. And we're going to go ahead and put that wrench on that valve, install the bleeder bottle. There we go, nice and tight. And then we'll go open up our bleeder valve. Then we'll go ahead and jump in the driver's seat, start pumping the brake, and verify there's no more air bubbles within this brake line. Tighten our bleeder valve, and then we're going to go ahead and move over to the outer bleeder valve. And we're going to repeat the exact same steps for the outer bleeder valve. So install the bleeder bottle, open up the valve, pump our brake, make sure there's no more air bubbles, come back, tighten up the bleeder valve, and we'll go ahead and pinch the hose, and then we'll move right back to the inside one last time and verify there's no more air bubbles whatsoever in this system. And we took the bleeder valve cap from the old one and go ahead and put it right in the front of the new one. Looks very nice. And by having a helper press on the brake pedal, we're able to torque down all 5 of these lug nuts using 100 foot-pounds. And then bring in the wheel, and let's go and install the wheel. Nothing very difficult. Make sure it's nice and flush and it's not touching the caliper. And we'll put in our new lug nuts. That's 2, 3, 4. And let's get the 5th one on there. Very nice. And we'll go ahead and raise the vehicle, remove our jack stand, and then lower our vehicle. And of course, we'll torque all these down to 95 foot-pounds. And we'll take a look. It has a nice, beautiful gap in between the caliper and the wheels. That's very nice. No issues there. And then all you have to do is repeat the same steps with the driver's side as well. However, there is one extra step. Take your trim removal tool, and you got to remove one cover just to access the bracket for the brake line. And our very last step of this process, all we have to do is break in our new brakes. This is known as pad bedding. It's a very easy process. All you have to do is 5 aggressive stops from 40 to 10 miles an hour, then 5 again for 35 to 5 miles an hour. And you want to do this very aggressively back to back, and then do some nice casual driving for several minutes just to cool down the brakes. You don't want to brake suddenly, you just want to allow them to cool down. And you're going to smell a little bit of resin burning when you're doing the bedding process. This is very normal. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Whoops. Yeah.